the collegiate system in the US, right? NCAA, like being able to play in college really gives us an edge. And then you think of like Title IX. So then you compare us to the rest of the world, and all these things are in our favor.
Right.
So I think that is embedded in the culture of our women's national team, like the gratitude and the work ethic and just that fire that is still there.
Hey, this is Shawn Stringham with Game On Live Studio. We're all about helping grow the sport of water polo through understanding best practices from the perspectives of athletes, parents, coaches, and the legends of water polo. If you're looking to get into water polo or want to see water polo grow as an athlete, supporter, or coach of the game, then you should subscribe. Click on the bell and get notified every time we release a new podcast. Game on. Welcome. Thanks again, Brenda Villa, for joining us here on the Game On Water Polo Pod. Genai, as our first guest, we're kind of starting out with a punch here, don't you think? I mean, she's fantastic from a historical perspective. She's fantastic in the current, and my guess is she has quite a bit to say about the future of water polo. Yeah,
we definitely set ourselves up because where do we go from here, right?
Yeah, right. Like I was thinking about that. Like we should have started with someone like totally random and not Brenda Villa, but I guess we're gonna go for it here. So thank you so much, Brenda. It's one of those. I guess the nice thing about starting with you is that you don't need much introduction. You are one of the most dominant water polo players of our generation. Participating in the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, the 2004 Olympics in Athens, the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, the 2012 Olympics in London, right? What an incredible story. And I part of what I really want to talk about today is both your background, but also, like I mentioned, what do you see where the sport going? And as we kind of jump into this, like I mean, if you look at your history and your story, right? You started playing with the boys in Commerce. I read Sydney's Silver Lining, and that's super and cool. That's a fantastic story of like just scrapping to get a team together. And tell me what was the most different between participating at Sydney in 2000 and that process of getting to London in 2012, right? Just kind of that development of women's water polo over that time.
Big question.
Well, I mean, you think about Sydney, the women were put into the Olympic program December of 97. So you have 2 years to prepare for something, right? And something so new. There were so many, I think, women coming out of retirement. Like it was such a big moment for the sport.
Right.
And the way the qualification system worked, it was strange. It was like the highest ranking America's team at the FINA World Cup qualifies as the America's representative, which you're like, okay, but there's so much that's out of your control, right? Because depending sometimes on the other bracket or who you play, who you lose to. So it was an incredibly bizarre experience now that I think back compared to Sydney. But I think there were so many lessons learned in those 2 years. We didn't qualify the first time. We qualified in Europe. There was a massive upset when Hungary and Italy, two historically strong water polo countries, don't qualify for the first ever Olympics. But I think that has set up, the trajectory, I think, of women's water polo in the Olympic era. And then I think about London, and I think about a new coach. And yes, the ending is a new Olympic coach. Guy Baker had coached 3 Olympics prior. It was a new coach, and not a new system entirely, but some new philosophy, right, that Adam brought in. And it wasn't always roses. And I mean, luckily it worked out because we all believed in one thing. So that was an interesting experience too. But it was, for me, that was special because we qualified for the Olympic Games at the Pan American Games in Guadalajara. And my mom is from Jalisco, the state that Guadalajara is in. So for me, it was like a perfect ending, right, to my career, where I finally get to play in Mexico in front of my 2 Mexican grandmas, and that qualified us for London to the Cinderella gold medal ending.
And how about like the support of the sport, right? From a brand new Olympic sport being invited into the Olympics to a gold medal. In that time, you won every color of medal, which is kind of a kind of cool thing. How did the sport change or get identified differently for women's water polo in that time frame?
Well, I think back to those late 90s. That's when water polo became varsity, right, in colleges. So there's more scholarships for college players. So that just opened the door for just more talent to come through, right? And then you think of the national team, it went from, I mean, our support, like, it was so minimal back then. I don't even want to go into numbers, but it was so minimal where, you know, 5 of us
you can nothing to survive off of.
No, like you think about it and it's like, I was so young that for me, it kind of worked, right? Because I didn't have all these other like real life worries to think about. But in some ways, like as a first gen, like lower, like coming from a lower income family, like there were times where I was like, oh, like my parents are supposed to help me also. Like it was just this strange time, right? Where a lot of my other teammates, some did have that parental financial support that I kind of had in different ways. But now like going to London, it was so different. Or even the thought of, you think about Sydney, we come back with the silver medal and there's prize money with that. If we were in college, we couldn't get it.
Right.
And then that January of 2001, I think the USOPC and NCAA figured it out and they said, no, these athletes should be able to get that prize money. So then there was maybe not half the team, but a few of us, quite a bit of us on the team from Sydney that could have used that. Right. And it was, no, you can't get it. Good luck.
Right.
No, huge change from Sydney to London. A lot in the financial area from the USOPC, from USA Water Polo, even I would think from coverage, even, you know, social media, I think was just really kicking off right then.
Right. Yep.
There was some Twitter, right, and Facebook, but like Instagram was like starting to blow up. So I feel like, I don't even know if that was, who knows, but I feel like that was the beginning of a lot of different opportunities for just sports in general.
Right. And in your, I mean, and how do you personally feel about that? I mean, you've been such a huge influence in the sport. And obviously now the women's team is absolutely dominant on the world stage, right? And talk to me a little bit about the culture of how that team changed, how that national team changed from one Olympiad to the next. And kind of how is that something that you actively managed as a team captain or as coaches to kind of get into what is pretty cool culture, what it seems like from, you know, all perspectives currently in the women's team now?
There's been 6 Olympics and only 41 women. Like there's a lot of repeat Olympians. So that just means that the foundation, the story share, the legacy kind of continues. There's still a connection from, if you think about from the first Olympics, right? Like Mo coached Maggie Steffens, right?
Right.
Then I played with Mo on that Olympic team. And then like Petey and I then, you know, played with Mel Siderman and Maggie. They're still now on the team, right? They won 2 gold medals. So there is still this cool connection that lives within the women's water polo team. And a lot of it is the shared stories that we tell. Like we talk about the connected circle. You can't break our circle. Like we have each other in the pool. I mean, of course, there's been some tweaks because then you think about Guy coaching for 3 Olympic cycles. Now Adam coaching for 3 Olympic cycles. So there have been some changes, but there are still a lot of foundational things. And even if you think about it, like Guy and Adam coached together, right? So there's just a lot of connections. And I think that is so great. And I think the collegiate system in the US, right? NCAA, like being able to play in college really gives us an edge. And then you think of like Title IX. So then you compare us to the rest of the world and all these things are in our favor.
Right.
So I think that is embedded in the culture of our women's national team, like the gratitude and the work ethic and just that fire that is still there.
I have a couple of questions, like for the more normal person that doesn't go to 4 Olympics, right? What piece of advice do you give a young girl or a boy starting off as in high school. That's maybe not an established program, but they want to help grow that program and create their own legacy the same way you women did with the women's national team?
Great question. And I think, I mean, you don't have to be an Olympian, right, to create a legacy in your community, to help grow the sport, to make a difference. I think one thing I tell kids a lot is like, talk about your dreams and your goals out loud, like dream out loud, like tell people what you have in mind, because you'd be surprised the support systems that can be out there to help you follow those dreams. I think a lot of times, like, you write about them or you might tell one person, but the more people you talk to about them, I think you will find, especially water polo, right? We're such a small community where it's like, hey, you want to, your goal is to go to ODP. Like, I can help you. Like these are the steps you need to do. Like, oh, you want to start a girls team. Like, here are 5 people that I know that started, their girls programs in their own cities. Maybe I'll connect you so you could have a conversation. So I think just believing in yourself and then talking about your dreams out loud, I think, are small steps that could go a long way.
Nice. Thank you.
In terms of that, kind of back to the culture piece, is that something that the coaches managed, or did that come from the athletes? Right, we are going to have this circle of gratitude. You're in this circle. Where did that manifest from? Like, where did that vibe come from?
I think it's mutual, right? I think it's this like shared vision that you have. Like, you can't. I mean, the coaches pick the teams, right, but I think in the water, you don't hear your coaches half of the time. Let's be honest, right? So
I can attest to that. How about right? None of the time?
I mean, I'm a coach now, and I'm just like, okay, like at the end of the day, I'm yelling because I want to give you information, but you can't hear half the time. So I think it's knowing that, right, as water polo players, getting in those tough moments and knowing that the trust that you have to build with each other, and then just you have this common goal, coaches and players. So I think it was created simultaneously. And I think back to the circle, like that started like with the 2000 team. And if you ask the women's now, like a lot of them will talk about the circle, or there's pictures of the circle. And it's just like the one time before your game starts where you're all connected, coaches, all staff and players. Right. So right. I think that is something, it might've started with the coaches, like knowing that we needed to connect that way back in the day. But I think that's something that as players, we're like, yeah, like this is the one time we could all be together and we know we have each other's back, like whatever happens in the water. So I think it's both.
Right. So how do we translate that really kind of incredible vibe that the team has to attract more women and girls into the game? Like I'm here sitting in Salt Lake City, Utah. Obviously COVID had a big impact, and our women's team is maybe a third the size of our men's team. And we're trying to attract women all the time, doing clinics, trying to get how do as clubs and coaches, how do we make sure that we feel like women have a place in this game and as a place to find strength, right? Because I love it. I have 3 daughters. They all play water polo and they love it. I love it. Like, they are super strong and confident and kind of growing off into college now. And that game has made a huge impact for them. How do we attract more women into the game and girls?
$1 million question. But right? I think that from a young age, if we're able to promote the fun that you have and the friendships that you will establish. And I think that friendship piece is really important to girls. So then how do we create like bring a friend, bring 5 friends? Because I think girls would be willing to try new things if that was the case. And then for me, I've done a lot of work in under-resourced areas or a lot of areas that are underrepresented in our sport. And a lot of it is the parent piece.
Yeah.
Like, how do we make parents trust us? And then how do we sell our sport to them? So they're like, sure, my kid will try this. So it's a combination, but I do think that having like 10 and under teams that maybe you do offer girls only, right? Like I know that a lot of the times when you're starting programs, you don't have enough. So you just kind of all put them together, but sometimes you do need the girl only piece.
Right.
So just being able to think outside the box and it might be as simple as like bring a friend to water polo, because there might be girls that are like, I want to try, but I don't want to go by myself.
Right.
Like, maybe it is as
So-
simple as that.
So I know for college, you had a male head coach, and both national team coaches you played for males. How important do you think it is to have a female coach or representative to see themselves as for young girls on deck?
Huge. So I did a talk with CIF Southern Section about Title IX and coming up on the 50th anniversary. And because I played with boys on the high school team, right? And one of the questions was like, who are your key mentors, right? Or who are people that made an impact for you growing up? And one is my mother, and the other one was my swim coach, who was a female, who was a female Latina, I identified myself in her. And here is the support where, I mean, we hear about the tensions, right, between swim teams and water polo teams all the time, but that's a mentor that had a huge impact on me. So I think back and I'm like, she was supporting me in the toughest times, right? Like high school, like choices. And for her, it was like swim because it's going to help you in water polo. I know water polo is the sport you're going to choose. So to have somebody do that, right? And then we're really good friends, all this stuff. But it's so incredible that I haven't had that many female coaches in my life, but she was a huge impact. And then I think back of my college coach, like Susan Ortwine, like at the time I didn't think about it, but I'm like, oh, she was, a different support in college that I needed, that I didn't know I needed. And then on the Olympic team, like you think of like Heather Moody, who was my captain in 2004, a teammate in 2000, then on the coaching staff, 2008, 2012. And like for 2012, for me, she was a lifeline.
Right.
So you need more. I mean, I've had conversations with Adam and USA Water Polo about the last two like coaching staffs, right? Like they're great. And are we getting women in the pipeline? Are we asking them why we don't have women on those high levels and what we can do different now to start supporting them, if that is something that we think is important, which I think it is.
Well, and Genai, maybe a question for you in terms of like that translation. Like we're trying to build a very, very active splash ball program at Olympus, right? And one of the best weeks of splash ball is when I had 10, 12 and under girls show up. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And so literally I didn't cancel because we have our women's program is working out at the same time as the splash ball kids. And I said, okay, girls, you're going to come over here and you're going to play against these splash ball girls. And we're going to take a picture of this because this is going to be generational type thing. And they came over and it was the best time we've had in a long time. Like they played, the splash ball girls were scoring on them and it was super fun. But like, I think that whole idea of connecting generations is super important, whether it be senior in high school and 12-year-olds or, Brenda and Maggie and whoever the next Maggie or Brenda might be, like that next icon type thing. So, I mean,
so for your club as well, specifically, Shawn, how many female coaches do you have?
We have one female coach, Alexis Courtney, who coaches the women. And then we're actively looking for other coaches right now that are women as well. So, and I'll be, my daughter graduated in 2019 and she's coaching, not with us, but up at college. So, I mean, again, I think that's, to me, is critical. Like I wanted a woman coach to coach the women. I think that's very, very important for them personally. So,
and Brenda, I don't know if you know, they're actually Colleen coaches McKendry, coaches both the men's and women's head programs. So we're making progress. It's just slower than we'd like. But as we pull our sport together and grow our community, we will get full representation.
Yeah.
I think I didn't know that. And thank you for sharing that, because even stuff like that, right? Like information where we can tell everyone like, look, a women's coaching both programs, it does it. And I didn't realize that at the Olympics, the South African coach was the first female head coach at an Olympics, right? Like, did you hear about that? Do you know about that? Right? Like, it's one of these things where we have these milestones that are happening that no one is aware of. So we're not even sharing those stories. So I think we have to share those stories, because then that might encourage other people to be like, oh, it can be done. And it could be a matter of, oh, why don't I coach boys or men? Right? Like, I remember I applied for the Occidental job, which would have coached men and women, like Chris Lee and I did, and he ended up getting the job. But like, that was something that at the moment I was like, oh, I can do this. And then now that I think about it, I go, I don't know if I want to do that, but why not? Like, why do I hesitate in coaching boys or men? Right.
Right.
But I think because there's less women out there. So I'm like, wait, how am I going to divide my time? But I wish that just more people were coaching both genders.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, an interesting like connection about women's coach and actually roundabout is that Joan Young, who was my high school water polo coach in Salt Lake City, was the mother of Courtney Young, also known as Courtney Johnson, who played with you in Sydney. So it was like, that was, I just put those kind of connections together of like, and Coach Joan, like coached me forever and was a huge influence in my water polo development, but it was just kind of a fun connection there for back to that Olympic team. So.
Yes. And who knew that Courtney's mom coached? That's so awesome.
Without Courtney's mom, I'm not involved in water polo. So it's a crazy world.
Small world. You know,
Small
we go
world.
back to that. Water polo is like 1 degree separation.
Everywhere we go. Yeah.
And that's obviously it's kind of a problem. We always want our sport to grow fast as possible, but also it's nice because we have those human connections. Everyone's accessible. I remember when Shawn and I saw you at JO's this summer, and Ears on Deck brought you down to introduce you to the kids and the way they lit up to be able to live and breathe and connect directly with, you know, a goat as yourself is very rare in other sports.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's our dilemma, right? Like we want to grow, but we don't want to lose that. So hopefully we can figure out the perfect formula for that.
Right. So Brenda, what are you most excited about for the future of water polo? Part A of that question. And part B of that question is, what do we need to address to create mainstream acceptance and recognition of our sport? Like 2 parts there. What are the 2 things you think, like the pros and cons of water polo?
Wow. I'm excited about the continued growth. I think that at the moment there's some intentionality about being more inclusive and thinking about where we can help the sport grow. And I think that'll help with the diversity that I want to see in our sport. So I think I'm really excited I know I'm excited about that. I know that we'll continue to grow. And I think there's great people in this sport and energy that is coming together for that. I think, I'm confused as to why our sport isn't mainstream, right? You talk about like a sport that's action packed. It's a short game. I think one of our barriers or obstacles is how do we the live action, right, that you see at a game and that feeling to the screen, right? Like, how do we get better cameras at more facilities so when we do show it, it's great. Like I was watching, what is it? The SNR Classic, the boys in California, they are having like NorCal and SoCal teams playing. It was Harvard Westlake against Sacred Heart. I coached some of the boys at Sacred Heart from a program I ran up north. So one of the moms sent me the link. So I was watching them, and Harvard Westlake has like 2 camera angles and they were streaming it for free. It was incredible, right? That I couldn't make it to the game, but I could watch them. And they had one side camera, or I think it was behind the goal or above, but one view was just amazing.
Right.
And like for the water polo fanatic, right? You're like, wow, I wish that I could see more high school games, more college games this way. So I think if we could figure out a way for more pools to be able to stream on their own and have these angles, I think then we show the non-water polo fanatic, like, wow, this sport is really cool. They're swimming and not touching the bottom and elevating that high. Like people are always so incredibly surprised at how athletic I think water polo players are and that they don't touch the bottom or the side, right? So like, how do we showcase that more often and in a better way?
Right.
Shawn, that's Shawn's vision with Game On Live Studio.
That's right.
You saw JOs. How many games did you stream at Junior Olympics over all 3 sessions?
We streamed over we did like over 200 hours of water polo streaming for Junior Olympics. So we had the 4 days at the 2 championship courses at all 3 sessions. So I don't know however many games that was, too many to count.
Yes. So we're on the same page here.
We are
Shawn.
on the same page.
You know what it's going to take.
He's actually doing it.
I'm doing it.
This is exactly what it takes. We all talk about it. We need to see more water polo, but we're waiting for the ESPNs of the world, and we have to just start ourselves from our own community. That's why
And
it's
I'll
gotta
add,
going.
and I'll add that I think, who gave me this stat? Maybe Greg Muskell, director of communications at USA Water Polo, who's
That knows
fabulous,
everything. Yeah.
who's been, or what's his new title now? Like he's been around forever. He knows our sport. He knows other sports, right? And I think the data of who is watching what we stream is disappointing.
Yeah.
So if our own membership isn't watching what we are putting out there, then what are we complaining about?
Right.
What are we complaining about? So it's also like a call to action to people that love this sport and talk about wanting to see it grow. But if we can't spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes watching what is being live streamed, then it's on us.
Yeah. Yeah, no question. And I mean, it was pretty amazing at Junior Olympics. I think the streams that of those championship games, I mean, we have over almost approaching 20,000 views of that. So I mean, it's one of those of people will watch it if you have quality production. That's been one of the big things that I've been trying to bring to the sport is these athletes deserve to have their names read, be recognized for how awesome they are as athletes. And like you said, quality cameras and all mixed together into a production. I mean, Greg and I are working to do some college games this upcoming week, in the next couple of weeks. Game On Live Studios doing the UCLA Cal game at Cal. So that's going to be cool. We've got a couple of tournaments that we're working to put together just to create more accessibility, right? Because the nice thing about streaming is that it lives there and people can go back and see it live, but also be able to go back and see it. So we're working. I'm on the same page. We got to show every game or close to it. So for people to be able to love it and go back to it.
So Brenda, what are your own personal goals and involvement these days with water polo and life?
Yeah, and life. Well, I'm in a interesting time right now because I just moved from NorCal to SoCal. So I'm taking some time to figure out next steps, but it seems that water polo is always a part of my next steps, right?
I can never get away.
To walk away. I do like, as I say, the dark side of it, right? Like the admin side or the coaching side. Like I do enjoy coaching and connecting with athletes. I was at a school that I was able to coach middle school and high school. So I essentially was able to be a part of these athletes' lives for like 7 years, right? So that was like incredibly special to see them as middle schoolers and then high schoolers. So trying to figure out what my next steps are. But for the sport, I think there's more growth to be had. And I hope to be able to help USA Water Polo identify just cities and places across the US where we could maybe do some intentional community engagement to see our sport grow. And I know you with the Alliance, right? And then me being a part of the racial equity task force, we're doing work, but this is work that you don't see it in fruition like instantly, right? It's you're putting in time and effort and connecting. So that to me is something that I'll continue to do because of commerce and the incredible opportunities that I was able to have. Like I want to pay it forward. Like I can't step away. And like you do all this incredible work, Genai, with all these clinics, right? So like for me, it's also being intentional about those clinics, right? Like where do I go? Who do I connect with? And that goes back to having athletes being able to see themselves in their coaches. So, in all of this stuff, just trying to be accessible. And I mean, I love the sport, so I won't walk away. So those are like some dreams I have. And one that's like out there that I have no control over, but it goes back to like this equity piece and this other, just things that I'm passionate about is hopefully soon we'll have 12 women's Olympic team competing to the men's 12 Olympic men's team competing. So IOC, FINA, if we could get working on that would be great.
So what are some of the key from both of you, what the purpose of that task force? Obviously inclusion, diversity, but what are the working points now that you've started in that committee that you guys are working towards in the task force?
Well, have recommendations that we give to the board at the end of this month.
Okay.
Some of that is, things we've already put in place is just identification and registration, like who's in our membership. We want people to feel seen. And how do we know how to connect if we don't know who's in our membership? So like even in registration, like how do you identify things like that, where it was like these quick fixes that we could do, which gives us information. We ran a pilot program this past summer, so there was some learnings from there that we'll share. So it's not about reinventing anything, right? It's like, how do we partner with other programs that have boots on the ground, because we can't be everywhere. Well, but how could we help others get going? And then it's also about like where our growth.
Should we see your little one? Bring him in, Brenda. Bring her in. Because we talking about growth of the sport. This is how we grow the sport.
Yes. Tell them what you're learning to do right now.
I know how to ride a bike now.
Yay. Fantastic.
With training wheels or no?
I don't have training wheels.
That's impressive.
That's fantastic.
That's like learning how to swim, learning how to ride a bike. Those huge milestones.
Oh yeah. Okay, go practice.
So I bring back to your daughter coming in the frame, and you're talking about how special it was for you to play in front of both of your grandparents, your grandmothers in Mexico. For me, we keep talking about this community, but it's at home. It's not everyone that's in the pool. It's the family support that really helps people feel supported and comfortable in their zones, and trying something new. So it's not just saying, oh, here we're offering a camp in this area that's never had a water polo before. Here's a scholarship. I think it's really more of an educational piece and cultural piece. I talked to some people that, they had a lot of, I don't know, pushback, almost like being at minimum not supported from their own community, because it wasn't a traditional sport that people are accustomed to playing. So if we have 100,000 people right now playing, how do we reach the entire country and make it more accessible and supported? And I think, family and school is going to be a huge component of that.
I agree, right? It's like, it is like parent education, like earlier, like connecting with the parents, like your kids are safe. Like you may not know how to swim, but we will keep your kids safe. Come and try it. And then sharing our stories, Genai, of like the incredible memories that we've made with teammates, the travel, the competition, and being able to share that with other communities, where you can tell them like these experiences you get with soccer and but you'll also get it with water polo. And this is the additional things that you'll get with water polo too. Like you're learning a life-saving skill, like a life skill. So I think being able to pitch that, I think, is so important. I think sometimes we forget that.
And I would love to dive in just a little bit about water polo in Commerce, California. Like you started, just doing the math here, in 1988, playing water polo in Commerce, California, which is, the appropriate way to say this is that you see the teams from Commerce and they don't look like the other teams, right? Which is fantastic. And so it is a culture thing, right? I think the culture of water polo is important, and having that community involvement. Why is Commerce so successful? What are the things that they're doing to attract kids into the program? Obviously you've had a critical role in that. There's a building named after you. It's an incredible facility. Like what are some of the key things that they're doing in a community level to make water polo be such a viable option for their kids?
So, you talk about like history and you think of Commerce, and one thing is they have that historical knowledge, right? Or I guess institutional knowledge of water polo, right?
Sure,
like
for sure. Yeah.
In the 70s, Sandy Nita, who Olympic swimmer, works for the city, starts the program, and the city at that point has decided to invest in its youth, provides all these free access to all these teams. So a city makes an investment. You start, a woman who is very accomplished starts program, right?
Yeah.
And it's just there. It's now a fabric of the city. Like everyone there knows it. And it started with, I think, the free access to, or low cost some lessons, right? And
Right.
the pool was such a focal point of the city. It was like such a nice building. Like I talked to people that grew up in the neighboring communities, like East Los Angeles, Montebello, and everyone knows the Commerce back the Aquatorium,
Yeah.
because it was this nice facility that everyone could go to.
Right.
It was free for Commerce residents. And if you weren't a resident, people tell me, I paid 10 cents, I paid 50 cents, but it was still so accessible, right? And I
Right.
think that pools usually are not accessible to lower income or marginalized communities in general.
Right.
So I think that's one thing that Commerce established really early on. And then everyone was having fun. And it's such a small city that like, oh, my cousin plays. So then everyone just knows about it. And then you add on top of that, the success of the teams, right? So not only does someone have a relative that's playing, then you're like, oh, they're really good. Oh, they travel. So
Right.
then you start adding travel, and then you have the support of the city where it's vans to games, there's buses to games. So then working class families that maybe don't put their kids in sports because, oh, I don't know if we can make it to practice or make it to games. Then all of that is taken, all those barriers
I was just saying, removing the barriers. Yep.
are gone.
Yeah.
So then why wouldn't you put your kid in, maybe not water polo, but there's softball and there's volleyball. So why wouldn't you put them in a sport? And then it's word of mouth, right? It's like everyone is so tight in the city that it's like, oh yeah, they have a great time. Let's do this. So, and I would say that Commerce also back then, it was, you did both. It was Monday, Wednesday, Friday swimming, Tuesday, Thursday water polo. So there wasn't this competition between sports. So that just added to all the different layers that have created this machine, I guess, for lack of a better word, right? Where everyone knows about it. And then you get into the era of like my age where, oh, now you can play in college. Oh, now there's a potential like athletic scholarship, where there was women before me that were on the junior team and were amazing, national team, but they didn't have the opportunity to play in college. So then that comes along, and that is also another game changer, right? Where communities where your parents are not going to be able to pay for you to go to college or help in a significant way, you have to find other ways. So that created just another incentive. So, and then you have, then I go to the Olympics, then another Commerce resident, Patty, goes to the Olympics. So then it's like, wow, we have these
This is legit.
NCAA champions, we have Olympians, like, why wouldn't my kid try this sport?
Right. That's pretty cool. I mean, I think that little piece right there for those clubs and teams that are listening out there, you just laid out how to grow your team and club, right? Essentially make it free or low cost for your kids to be able to get in, provide quality coaching as they're at that level, so that have positive family experiences. I'm a fan of like travel. I think I'm into this 10 years now with my club, and I've talked about with my athletes that are alumni now. It's like, what's the best part of what we did as water polo? It's like, no one said like, oh, that one shootout win or any of that's like, oh, it's always traveling with your buds. You know what I mean? That's always the best part. And I think that's probably true whether you're on a 12 and under team or if you're on the Olympic team. Like the best part is just going and doing something different than most kids on the weekend. You know what I mean? And now hopefully we can stream it and show it and see that, and hopefully continue to create that flywheel effect of growth. So great. That's perfect. I love that. So
with your own foundation, Brenda, how is that going, and what information do you want to give any viewers?
Yeah, no, my foundation, last year we pivoted, right? I co-founded Project 2020, and that was really to kind of mirror Commerce in some way, right? To run programming in East Menlo Park and to provide some lessons. And now we've pivoted where we're not, the Brenda Villa Foundation, we're not necessarily creating programming. We're into like micro grants, like who can we partner with? Who can we help? Me and my co-founders, Kyle Utsumi and Kelsey Holzhauser, we have, I think, 75 years, right, of institutional knowledge between us. We've all played sports. We've all had different upbringings. Kyle has coached at the highest levels, like Kelsey has played in college, has, helped with businesses. So we have like all this knowledge that we want to share. So it's about how do we get you in front of a council meeting, right? If you need, pool hours to extend, or like, how do we help you create a splash ball program, or oh, you need, a grant, like apply for it here at our foundation. How do we wanted to amplify our previous foundation where it was in one area where we know that there's need in a lot of places, right? Or that like need, and it's not always financial need, right? It's also like, how do we do the coaches education? How do we help you with parents? Or how do we partner? It's not about starting something new. I think there's a lot of existing programs out there that if they had some sort of like mentor or consultant or help, that would go a long way. So that's what, my foundation wants to do now, what we're doing now. And it's moving slower than we want because there's 3 of us, right? And we had some great interns this summer. So it's coming along, and it's been really great to partner with the Swim for Diversity that was created, making waves in light of George Floyd. Last year, Stanford Women's Water Polo team started this Swim for Diversity event, and we were one of the organizations that they suggested people could donate to. So they have been 2 years where we've been able to raise a lot of money. So now, not a lot of money, we raised money, enough money.
Water polo money.
Right, to help others. So now, yes. So now we're hoping to find more orgs to team up with. Like one org that I'll tell you about is Ant in San Jose. And the thing that drew us to them is, bilingual swim school. Like how something that is, I think, overlooked often, but that can make a huge difference is if you have kids that can't speak the language of this important life skill that you're trying to teach, like how are they going to learn? Or how do we then invite a community in, right? Or they're like, we don't speak the same language. You want my kid in the pool and I can't swim. Like there's no way. So when we heard about this foundation or this swim school and what they're doing, we're like, we want to partner with you. We want to make sure you get more kids in the pool. And my co-founder went on a site visit and he's like, Brenda, you would have been so amazed at the multi languages that were being spoken and like all the families that were there, and just so happy to have their kids in the water learning to swim. So we want to find more orgs like that. So if there's anybody that comes to mind, like please reach out to us, send us an email.
Yeah, how do we connect with you? I'll be happy to put that in the show notes and in the description for YouTube. So what's the website or socials?
Yeah, Brett, our socials aren't that great right now. We'll
follow up after the show and put that information in.
Yes, but you can reach us through through our website, the Brenda Villa Foundation.org, I believe. I should know that. And then social media or to me, but there's an email info@brendavilla.org or BVFN.
Or we'll get all the details. It'll just be posted for people like me, visual or even active links to click.
Yes.
Connect directly.
We'll post the links down in there and we'll find them. And as we close the show, we'll have it there. Very good. Well, fantastic. Genai, do you have any closing questions or follow-up for Brenda?
I just want to say that Kyle's amazing as well. Not only is he working with Brenda, he's working with Alliance with us as well. And, he has a wealth of information, obviously Silver Lining. He's going back to the original female Olympic water polo games that Brenda took part in with that silver medal, helping coach down the Stanford area, and just a true supporter of our sport. And sounds like very open-minded.
Should be one of our next guests, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah. We can make that happen.
We can make that happen. Brenda, I truly one last closing thought that I've asked all of my guests and other groups and events, but we're going to continue to the tradition on this podcast. What's your favorite hype song? What's your song that you listen to right before the game or between that coaching moment? Like what's the song that's going to bring down the house for Brenda?
Okay, there's a lot.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, one song I can't even I put on for my city. I think that's the title, or if not, I can find it for you. But there's some I don't know all the titles though. There's definitely some Jay-Z and Kanye West that Betsy Armstrong and I would rock out to before London. when were we roommates? Probably a lot of times, but let's see. I mean, sometimes there's Spanish in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some Juanas in there. It depends if it's what, like right before a game or on the bus ride before the game. There's, you can't be too hyped on the bus.
You can't be
We
too
still have,
hyped on the
like,
bus
an
for
hour.
sure.
So I just need something. There's, Spanish always connects me to my family, to my mom, and they're always a strength of mine. So there's always Spanish in there. Oh God, I wish I knew more titles of songs, but I mean, I would
Yeah,
say
so-
rap and R&B definitely in Spanish.
So your job is to make sure we get the right links for the foundation.
I'll do that.
and a couple song titles so that we
Okay,
can put
I'll
them in
do
there,
that.
because
Yeah.
we're gonna build a song list on Spotify, and we're gonna
Yes.
assign them to you so that that so the kids can go out and have the ultimate hype list from their heroes.
Oh, yes.
So
Can I get a game on? You hear your best game on?
Game on.
Game on.
game on. Thanks, Brenda. We appreciate it. Love having you on the show. Thanks for being our initial guest. And obviously, we'd love to come back to you as things continue to grow. So
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. I love talking about water polo. Love what you guys are doing. So please reach out whenever.
thanks, Brenda. Thanks, Genai.
Take care. Aloha.